What is going on? Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What is Your Story? But in this edition, I'm doing a little twisty twist. So I was working to upload some interviews that I had done in the past, and I had technical difficulties. So I butchered one interview, can't find another. And the third interview that I have to post is too long for this streaming equipment. So until I figure out how to cut it without ruining yet another interview, I am interviewless. I don't have interviews to share. So I decided for whatever episode I've been doing, and I have done quite a number of interviews at this point in my life. I was going to interview myself, but not so crazy as asking myself questions and then answering them, just kind of giving you guys insight as to how what your story came about, why I'm super passionate about interviewing people, and how my own experience through life has helped guide me to this place where I truly enjoy connecting with and conversating with other individuals and learning about what their experiences have been in this lifetime and how they show up in service to others. And at the end of the day, guys, that's really what this is all about, is showing up in service to others. We all do that in our own way, whether or not we realize it. Whether you're a school teacher serving a child or a trash collector serving humanity by picking up waste so that we don't get ill, whether you are somebody who is in forensics, uncovering information that can aid in, whatever, a discovery of some sort, to somebody who is working on themselves so that they can experience life more fruitfully. All of those choices are showing up in service to the world. And so I love to highlight other people in their journey so that they can be seen, be heard, and hopefully, most importantly, inspire other people who might feel stuck or might not recognize their own worth and value, and encourage them and infuse them with the love that they are worthy of experiencing so that they can make a different choice or give themselves permission to experience life in a different way, more fruitfully. So, with that being said, you pressed play on What's Your Story, so I'm assuming that you know me. But if not, my name is Kerri Lewis, and I show up in service to people in love. Really, I make a choice every day to show up as love in the world, and that is the gift I give to other people. I have worked in addiction and mental health, supporting people through recovery, helping them overcome, anxiety and depression, and leaning into addictive behaviors, everything from drugs and alcohol to shopping and working. I'm a former corporate leader responsible for leading teams to achieve results in the retail space. And I'm a creative. I love to just show up and play and create and bring joy to myself, because I know that when I bring joy to myself, I am vibrating. I am outputting my energy from a place of love, and then I'm imparting that on other people. So, but it wasn't always like that, guys. And the truth is it was a hard and arduous and long fought battle for me to get to a place where I could love myself, truly love myself, and show up fully expressed and show up as myself unapologetically. Because when you love yourself unapologetically, you're able to love the world. You're able to extend yourself. Much like the conversations I've been having with other people recently, When you love yourself, you don't try to limit, filter, or box in anybody else because you fundamentally understand that we're constantly a contradiction. What feels right for me in this moment may not feel right for me in the next moment. And so I have to constantly be open to who I am in any given moment. That's true self love, right? I can be grouchy. I can be joy filled. I can be kind. I can be selfish. When I can love the whole of that experience, in my experience, that's true self love. When you can love all of that mess for yourself, you can love it for everybody else. And you're not so focused on making people right or wrong, good or bad. You are more focused on how you can see them, how you can serve them where they're at without expectation that they be or change anything about themselves, right? And in loving people from that place, you actually help them learn to love themselves and make different choices. Because when you love yourself, you choose to make choices that are more nurturing and supportive and caring for you instead of harmful, which is really where I was for so many years, guys. I spent much of my life in self loathing. As early as I can remember, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I was a very intuitive young little girl. I could feel people's energy. I could feel when something felt off. I could feel when people were afraid or when they were anxious or angry. And I was born in the 1980s. So back then, people didn't have the language or the skills or the wherewithal to be able to put voice to their feelings. They were taught to suck it up, to keep it pushing, not to talk about their feelings. And so when I would read a room, when I would read a parent or an adult who was anxious and I would say something about it, they would quickly tell me that everything was okay, that not to worry about it, nothing was wrong, which then I internalized and I made a story that something was wrong with me, that I was crazy, that I wasn't good because I would get punished a lot for putting words to what I was feeling around me because it scared people. And so I would find myself punished and I believed I was bad. I spent decades with that idea that I was bad, right? That I wasn't good enough, that I didn't measure up to other people, that I wasn't good enough in comparison to my sisters. And so I started to numb out. I first, as a young child, I lied all the time, guys. I lied and stole to try to make friends. People at school thought I was quirky, so I would steal money from my parents to buy people at school stuff, hoping that they would like me, but really they didn't care. They just wanted the thing I was giving them at the time. So I felt really lonely. And then I leaned heavily into drugs at 14 and sex. I would consume anything that made me numb out or forget or feel temporarily good. And then because I was chasing love, anybody who paid attention to me, I was willing to engage in sex with because I felt like that was the way that they were expressing love, not really recognizing that I was giving away my energy, giving away my power. And as a result, I was in this cycle of suffering. I was in this cycle of not feeling good enough, wanting to numb out, having sex, and feeling worse about myself for sleeping with somebody I didn't know who then never called me back or didn't care, or who was really cruel to me. And it was a really painful, relentless, endless cycle of suffering and numbing out and suffering and numbing out. Fortunately for me, I have some awesome parents who love to learn. To this day, they're consuming knowledge. And they imparted in me at a very early age the gift of reading. And in fact, to this day, when people ask me what my favorite book is, it's Anna Green Gables. One, because it was the first book that really captured my curiosity and got me excited to read. Secondly, because the character Anne was precocious, and she was unique, and she was quirky, and despite being an orphan, and despite being rejected, and despite experiencing trauma and pain, she stayed open. She was kind, she was curious, and she was fun, and she played, and she was theatrical, so I loved her. And so as I got older and I was struggling immensely, I escaped into books. And at 14, after my parents had, brought me to therapy and all these things, doing the best they could to try to save my life, because I mean I was miserable. So outside of doing drugs, I was happily trying to alive myself. I got into studying psychology at first. Like understanding like our thoughts and how our mind worked, and like our identities and the shadow work. And so even though I struggled with addictions, I was also learning. I was taking in information that in the future would later be the thing that saved my life because of the choices that I made, and I take full responsibility. I experienced sexual assault. I was raped twice, both times by people who loved me, a very good friend of mine, and then later on by a partner of mine who both of us were messy. We were in a very abusive cycle in a relationship. There was so much pervasive domestic violence, and it was on both our parts. Like, I never want to put it on the other person because we were both so lost and so numbed out in this pain. But that relationship ended up culminating in us having to break apart, and me really having to look at myself, and it forced me to get sober for the first time. So understanding psychology, I started to apply what I had been consuming information wise into how I could get sober. But I didn't understand how our belief system works, and so I still struggled. So I didn't finish high school as a result of choosing, to lean into drugs and suffering. But I was always a natural born leader. Like, my gift was to inspire. Even at a young age, I remember putting on plays to cheer up my mom, getting my brothers and sisters together to sing a song to my grandmother. And so at 17, even though I was struggling with drugs, I found myself in a leadership position. And in my early 20s, I was sober, and I created this belief that in order to be loved and worthy of achieving success, I had to hustle and grind and work my way up the corporate ladder. And so I did. And I wanted to be a good leader, guys, but I was horrible. I mean, when I look back, I was such a dictator, and I used fear as a method to get people to do the work, right? And so I was successful, but it was a success that was short lived, and it was at the cost of other people's spirits because I used intimidation and the fear of firing them and to get them to perform. But because I am a kind and loving person, even then, I knew there had to be another way. And because I studied psychology, I knew I could find other ways. And so I started reading leadership books and studied everything about Brene Brown and Daring Leadership, which then led me into philosophy and stoicism. I love the great Stoics, Marcus Aurelius. Right now I have Aristotle on my wall, Epictetus or whatever his name is. Like, I just love their logic driven minds that actually I later found out was seeped in theology and spiritual teachings from even prior to when they were their great thought leaders of the time. And as I consumed information around leadership, I really started to change how I spoke to and worked with other people. Do you hear that I say other people? Because I didn't understand at that time in my early to mid 20s, that how I spoke to myself had a direct impact on how I spoke to other people. And so my work really focused on how I could impart kindness and move the needle with other people and organizations to be successful. Right. And so and I achieved great success, and I worked my way up in leadership for Starbucks. But my mental health was crap, man. Like, personally, my mental health was crap. And so after I got into physical fitness as a means to have an outlet to de-stress, I took up boxing and I started to do better. But again, guys, subconscious beliefs, if you're not working on plucking those out, then you will forever self sabotage, even if you don't know, because our subconscious, like our internal narrative, creates our reality. So if I believe I'm worthless, even if I'm logically like, oh, I can be successful, I'm inevitably going to self sabotage. And I did. And so I found myself in a car accident, super depressed. As a result of my mental health, I lost my job at Starbucks. I worked there for 13, 14 years. And I thought, what next? I ended up working for Nordstrom very quickly after, within a week, because again, I identified my success as having to achieve, having to work, having to produce. And again, I started working up the corporate ladder. But by then, I was aware of mindfulness practices, tapping, Reiki, meditation, breath work. And that led me to the study of theology. Great spiritual texts from the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, Hinduism, Buddhism, the the Quran, the Bible, A Course in Miracles. And so I started to put two and two together around spirituality and psychology and like kind of meld them into my experience, recognizing that I had to work on my subconscious programming. Fortunately, neuroscience was on the forefront and was becoming more popular and mainstream, and also quantum theory and physics, vibration, energy, the measure of and the proof that, and my logic mind, right, coming from my parents with academia, needed the science to prove the theology of the spiritual texts that I was consuming, to kind of marry them so that I could buy into giving myself permission to change my own thoughts, my own beliefs, my own patterns of behavior. So that's what I started to do. I started to make choices about how I saw myself. For example, I saw myself as a really bad person for stealing and lying as a young kid, um, because I was always taught that those things were bad. But when I understood as an older person that I was behaving out of fear, behaving out of the need to feel accepted, which every human being needs, I was able to give myself permission to let the guilt go. And the reason that's important, guys, is guilt and shame are very low energy. Meaning, if you feel a lot of guilt and shame, you are probably more tired, you're prone to chronic diseases, more mental health issues, because it's a low vibration and we're energy. So we're in this thought pattern that keeps us feeling stuck and low. Once I had the science to show me that we're energy, the theology, the permission from spiritual texts to give myself permission to forgive myself, well, then I was able to rewire my brain. Woo, and that is when the magic started happening. I started learning that I was a worthy girl. And so I started to feel better and better. And as a result, I started to advocate for myself more. So when people in my company would make promises or commit to giving me promotions or supporting me and they didn't, I advocated for myself. I learned how to communicate my needs and hold people accountable for what they said that they would do for me, which felt better. And then I celebrated myself for doing the tough, scary thing because let me just tell you, to speak up for yourself, most people that feels very, very uncomfortable and they didn't like it. So I was rejected. But because I fundamentally had an understanding that I was not a piece of crap and that I was worthy of being loved and I was worthy of getting my needs met, I kept doing the hard things. And yes, I was still rejected by people. I was still judged by people, but didn't have the power it once had over me. Did it still bother me? Heck yeah. I'm a human. It hurt my feelings. I felt rejected. And sometimes I'd go back to that belief that I was bad and not good enough and whatever. But I had enough evidence now to support that that was just a story and I didn't have to subscribe to that story. Fast forward, I still struggle with this idea because I hadn't examined it that I didn't have to work 100 hours a week to be worthy of love, be worthy of success. And so I had two children. I was married to a beautiful man, but a man who, didn't align with who I was. I had outgrown him. And so I found myself numbing out to alcohol. Even though I had theology, I had all this information, guys, right? I just one drink at night, it was just to ease the stress. It was no big deal. Turned into two, turned into a bottle, turned into two bottles of wine at night because I was miserable because I still didn't realize that I had the power to question every belief. Yeah, I questioned the belief about me being worthless, but I didn't question the belief that I didn't have to work a million hours to achieve success. As a result, I found myself back in addiction. What a fun thing. And I was really struggling. That's when I got a call that my older sister passed away. And she died from drinking. She had a perforated stomach. I believe that's what it's called. And so I ended up in her apartment in San Diego, and she had thrown up all her blood. She had a hole in her stomach, I guess, and she threw up all her blood. So she basically bled out. That's how she died. And I'm sitting there by myself. And I had this out of body experience. Like I had this connection with something greater than me. And in that moment, I knew that one, I was perfect love, that I was enough, that I never needed to be more than who I was in this very moment to be worthy of love, and that I was always cared for and supported and protected. Number two, I knew that even with Shelly passing, everything was working out perfectly, and that I had the ability to break free of the chains of suffering once and for all in my life and break the generational trauma that had pervaded my family by helping support my young children in their journey, and learn to love themselves. And so within 6 months, I drove cross country with my sister's belongings by myself. And within 6 months, I had walked away from my secure career at Nordstrom. I walked away from all my assets, my shared house with my ex-husband, and I got my two children and I moved into the dining room of my twin sister's house. And I had no idea what I was going to do, guys. None. I was flipping terrified, but I knew that I had the ability to move forward and that I had the strength and would be guided to what I needed to do to help others and myself heal. And that's just what I did. I took all of the information that I acquired over the many years from 14 to my early 30s, and I infused it into how I experienced my life. I started with a morning spiritual practice. I was more compassionate with myself when I made mistakes, and I gave myself permission to fail often without judgment, and knew that even though I perceivably failed, I was learning and I was growing and I was healing. And as a result, I no longer needed to numb out at all, because who I allowed myself to become, and not even who I allowed myself to become, because I was always this person, but who I was allowing to show up in the world was the person I was always meant to be, was the gift, right? Our unique individual self. And so often, because we operate from these sets of beliefs and these habits and these behaviors, we're not aware that we're not being true to our nature, our internal voice, our spirit that just guides us to experience joy, to experience fun, to experience bravery, and all of these moments that we call life. And so fast forward, I was hired to help open up a cannabis company. That was actually in between my 6 months of leaving my marriage and things. And I reconcile working in the cannabis industry because I didn't consume cannabis excessively. And I know I'm a nerd. So I learned about the endocannabinoid system within our bodies, that we terpenes, cannabinoids, and how they bind to our own receptors. And I felt comfortable working in the industry that supports the wellness of other people's health, and cannabis can absolutely and does play a pivotal role in people's health when consumed um, in a way that is supportive rather than destructive, because anything done in excess then becomes an addiction. And so when COVID hit, I had a bird's eye view of just how ill-equipped people were of handling change, which is constant and pervasive, and dealing with unexpected things that life throws at us all the time. And so I went into business for myself, which was scary because I had negative dollars to my name. I was still living, and still do to this day, live with my sister. And I had no clear path forward. But all I knew is that I loved myself enough to listen to my spirit rather than the fear that had controlled my life for so long. And so over the course of these past years, I've been coaching people in the addiction and mental health recovery space. I've been doing community workshops and really passionate about helping people show up for themselves and love themselves and give themselves permission to take care of themselves. And I teach tools. And recently I found that I'm much more called to do speaking engagements and do shows where I connect with other people and talk to them, because I just find so much joy in learning and growing and being witness to other unique, beautiful people in their journey through this interesting and blessed thing that we call life, which for many years I didn't realize just what a blessing it is that we're even here. Think about it. A sperm had to break through all the other sperm to crack the egg to make that unique individual person that you are. I mean, that alone is a miracle, I fundamentally believe. And so now, as I move forward in my life, I see myself moving more away from coaching and doing more speaking engagements and speaking to communities, hopefully inspiring others to help themselves to do the work, to recognize that the pain is temporary, and that when we can sit in that pain and experience it, we are free from it, that it won't trap into our body as repressed energy that then manifests in physical illnesses, mental health illnesses, all of the things that many people in this world suffer from, you know? It came to what's your story, right? Is not only did I want to highlight people, I also recognize that the unique gift that I am is not for everybody. And that doesn't make me bad. That doesn't make me wrong, and certainly doesn't mean that I have to play small or show up any differently than who I am. But what I do fundamentally want to do is be of service to people. And I want to support people in their time of suffering, in their time of ease and disease and pain, and offer a solution, offer a way for them to experience life differently, more peacefully, more joy filled, more free. And that's my word for this year, freedom. In fact, I just got a new plant. Shout out to my nephew's wife, Megan, who brought me this beautiful plant that I named Freedom, because I always name my plants, and freedom is a beautiful gift to me, but free from this idea that we have to be influenced by the good opinion of other people, free from the idea that in order to achieve financial abundance, you have to work 100 hours or hustle and grind, free from the idea that just because you grew up in a family doesn't mean that you have to tolerate abuse or subscribe to the dogma that keeps, family members in pain and suffering, free from the belief that who you are is not enough, that you're bad, that your mistakes define the rest of your life. And I can't do that for everybody because I'm not for everybody. I'm a Kerri who cusses and swears, is covered with tattoos, who is unapologetic and showing up and singing on a radio station or dancing around the nation or creating or making a fool of myself. And so what's your story evolved so that I could highlight other people who feel called to be of service in their own unique way. One person I interviewed does cosplay on the weekends and shows up at movie theaters and sees the delight and the joy in little kids as they witness this beautiful woman dressed up as whatever character she has decided to show up as that day. And during the week, she's a dialysis nurse who helps people while they're sitting for hours, cleaning out their body and the toxins that are trapped in, and so I wanted to highlight individuals who show up as love in their own unique way. And here's the thing, guys, that I've come to learn. Love is limitless, which means love presents differently all the time. Love can be a smile from a young kid while you're waiting in line at a grocery store, to commenting on a shirt that you're wearing. Love can be staring at a homeless person's eyes when you see their pain and suffering and not turning away. You see the humanity in them and you're able to bear witness to them, even if you can't change your circumstances. Love is showing up in cosplay and being willing to go to a concert that most people wouldn't expect you to be dressed up as somebody, a character, and just being willing to be yourself. Love is selling cars and really caring about the experience that the individual is going to have while they're in this car buying process. Love is limitless. Love is identifying as non binary because you don't feel like you need to be attached to a label, or that gender is a reflection of who you are and your internal landscape. Guys, love is limitless. It really is. And the people that I interview are expanding themselves into that limitless expression in so many different ways, in offering themselves up as a gift to the world, whether it's through practicing Reiki or, hypnosis or singing a song, being a writer of songs, being an artist, juggler, musician, magician. Um, it's just it's all encompassing and fully expressed when we allow ourselves to do what feels right for ourselves. And ultimately, who I am today in this whole interview with myself, as I'm being inspired to share, would be my journey from feeling worthless to limitless, from feeling like I'm a waste of space to being an instrumental part of the healing of our world and of the human spirit, is allowing yourself to express yourself in a way that feels really good for you, whatever that looks like. Because it doesn't have to make sense to me. I don't understand what exactly brings my boyfriend joy when he dresses up as a Mickey Mouse character and goes and works out at the gym. But I know that it does bring him joy because I see the twinkle in his eyes. I see the smile on his face, and I feel the energy in his heart as he's walking through the gym and engaging with people and building those connections. I don't have to understand why my beautiful friend finds love in another female. I don't but I do get to see the gift of connection when they're with each other, that the shared joy and the peace and the fun that they experience. So often we judge ourselves, and because we judge ourselves, we don't allow ourselves to know ourselves, right? What feels good for us in any given moment. But to learn to know yourself is the greatest gift you can give the world, because when you know yourself, you're okay with who you are despite how the world views you, despite how people perceive you and how they label you. And so I really hope that my story of pain, of moving through really hard things, of making so many mistakes, and in making those mistakes, hurting people. You realize that even if you've wounded another person, you did it from a wounded place. And as you learn to love yourself, as you learn to forgive yourself, as you learn to show up, um, and give yourself permission to experience more joy and to step into what feels right for you, even if it doesn't make sense to your family, your loved ones, or society, that you impart that love on the world. And that's the greatest gift you can give anybody else. And that's the gift that I work tirelessly to give the world, in my own experience. And I'm still a human, guys. I still have the beliefs that I have to work to flush out. And I still have those moments of insecurity and fear when I feel small and I want to hide and not be seen. But those moments come less and less and less. And because I've continued to choose love over fear, and it's ultimately what I decide, no matter what I'm experiencing, I end up coming back home to love, and I give that gift to others. Thank you so very much for watching this unique episode of What's Your Story with Kerri Lewis, featuring Kerri Lewis. It's such a true honor and privilege to share in this time and space with you, share my energy with you all. You watching is a gift to me and fills my soul. And if I can leave you with one piece of advice, I'll say this: the only person who can save you, the only person who can free you, the only person who can truly love you is yourself. So I encourage you to do whatever is required to learn to love yourself.